What's happening, guys? JD at JD's Custom Buggies. So, reason I'm making this video is that my guys over at Trailmaster were kind enough to send me a warranty motor. This thing is pretty clapped out. It's not like they gave me something really cool for free, but they were nice enough to send us over. I was talking to my guy, and being that a lot of these newer buggies have these 200 motors in them, and there are different versions of them, the 200. So I wanted to get my hands on one, just tear it apart. So I figured my first instinct was just throw it on the table and start tearing into it. And I'm like, well, I could make a video of this. And as we go through it, show you the differences between like this 200cc version of a Trailmaster. And like I can tell you the differences I see between this and your normal 150. By staring at it from the outside, the casting looks pretty much identical. By eye, I'm not completely sure, but by eye I would say like this cover for the gearbox is definitely the same part number as the 150. I was assuming that the center piece here, or the left side crankcase, was identical also, but that's not the case. And what I've noticed right off the bat from looking at it, they sent it to me without the clutching just to make the shipping as light as possible, is that there's no access panel here. So meaning that if you want to change the cam chain on this guy, you're definitely gonna have to split the cases on it. All right, it's not as simple as removing this access panel and fishing up your cam chain up to to your head or whatnot. So on the 150 version, you have the access panel behind the variator. You've probably seen, because I have a full video of me rebuilding one of these 150 versions. And there's an access panel behind the variator. And it basically, there's two bolts that come out. There's two threaded bosses in there. You just thread them in and kind of wiggle the panel out. And that gives you access to basically, like I said, to remove or replace the cam chain or timing chain. So this cast here, even the inside, these gills and everything in here, these castings, they're all different. And basically what they do is, the reason why they have all these crisscross cast marks, basically give the case some strength so it doesn't snap in half. As far as the cover, it does take the same CVT cover. It actually uses the same clutching, and this is where Trailmaster, I hate to actually give them credit on something. As far as going, first off, I hate that they switched to this 200 motor. I'll take the 150s any day. Reason for that is parts availability, and just the ability to hop them up and whatnot. That being said, if you had to go with the 200, at least they were smart enough that it uses the same clutching components as the 150. So you have the same clutch pulley, variator, and whatnot, and belt size. So there's not a larger pulley like you see on like Dongfang and I want to say the other one is like Candy, where they're using like a GY6B variator and some huge pulley and some odd size belt that 758.5 by 22.3 by 30 belt. That was hard to find. I had a hard time being able to find this belt. Finally, one of my vendors, after giving him the back and forths with it, he was interested in being able to carry some of these 200 parts and whatnot. So he actually, we do have a version of the Bando belt, and then we have the less expensive version. It's under the Universal Parts name, but we do have this belt. It's now available. I know, besides me, customers would ask me all the time about where to get the 758 belt, and had a hard time finding it myself, but now we actually carry them on beltbuggies.com. So this completely uses every clutching component that's the same as the 150. So this motor is completely CVT upgradable with all the good stuff. You don't have to hodgepodge like the typical performance clutch on the bigger pulley and stuff like that. This is all, they kept this the same. That smart move, real smart move. Why the other companies are doing what they're doing, I have no idea. But what it comes down to is, when they bring these things over here, they're not really thinking about, well, this guy's going to want to hop it up and make it faster. They're just, for whatever reason, it all comes down to dollar and cents, and that's what they're all about. So, more stuff. just on the visual so far, 2-bolt valve cover. I know what's going on here with the head and the whole 2-bolt valve cover thing. We'll get into that as we get it off. The shrouds are different. Actually, I sell a version of these shrouds. I want to say they were listed as GY6B shrouds, but the shrouds are a little bit different. You can tell by this like indented curved thing. The other thing I noticed is the casting on this head. And like I said, as we get the valve cover off and we start looking at the head, this is like an emissions head cast, which is not, it's not a completely different thing. A lot of the performance heads I sell, I want to say the SSPG, the NCY, and the Naraku, they all have the emissions cast on them also, but it's blocked off. The only difference between the performance heads and this being blocked off is they have no like bolt holes for the block off plate. Usually on the performance heads, they just take the same cast and they block off the center of it. This is just a solid, it's all solid. There's no threaded holes or anything like that for it. I find the holes on the performance heads, at least when I do them on the race buggies, I actually find, I usually use one to stick a bolt in there for a ground screw, for a ground bolt right in the head. So, but that's here nor there. There is a, and I don't know because I've actually not seen too many, at least to study them or whatnot. It looks like there's a, I don't know if there's a dash indicator on the new Trailmasters or not, but I've seen motors and buggies that didn't have an indicator, still had the pigtail. But that's what that is. It's just basically a sensor on a buggy that basically clips in a wiring harness, and there'll be a display on there that will tell you whether you're in, drive neutral or reverse. So the designation on the case here, if you can catch that, it's definitely a 161 QMK. All right. Again, got buggies. My vendors were carrying what turns out is basically the same setup as what's on the Trailmaster right now. From the outside, that's all I see. Other than that, it looks like your typical 150 stuff. I don't know physically, I don't have a 150 to plop next to it, but it basically looks about the same size. Has all the same output shaft, transmission parts it looks to be. These holes here are for the mounting plate for the chain adjuster, and the same sort of cam setup for the cantilever for the shifter. So, like I said, this motor looks clapped out. Your vent is full of dirt here. I noticed that the threads are boogered up on the crankshaft. So let's get some tools and we'll tear it apart and see what we see. All right, so we'll start by getting the shrouds off the tank. I'm always in the habit of just cracking that screw because while it's bolted down, because once you take the bolts off and you're sitting there trying to with your hand, 90% of the times from the factory they're on there pretty tight. So So everything about the valve cover, got 2 bolts in it. It's got O-rings in here to keep the oils from leaking out, and basically it just bolts right into the head. Even the gasket is a little bit different. It's not your typical like O-ring gasket. It's thicker. not a big fan of these. I'd rather have the 4-bolt valve cover on there. But oddly enough, I had a customer send me a 150 motor. It said QMJ 157 on it, and it had a 2-bolt valve cover on it, and it had a Toller head, and it's what they used to call, or what we used to refer to back in the day as the old style B case, all right? And that's because the stud spacing was different, the bolt holes were different on the side here, and it wasn't the typical motor, so we just thought, oh, that must be a B case. So they had the 2-bolt valve cover on there, and we just knew, you know, when somebody would ask you a question on the old forums and whatnot, well, what motor do you have, 2-bolt or 4-bolt valve cover? 4-bolt would usually mean that was your typical A block or A case, and then if it was 2-bolt, we would just assume it was a B case, but not so much the complete truth there. It's just back in the day we didn't know any better. So here's our rocker assembly. It already looks a little different. Whew. Whoever had this burned it out. The oil smells really burnt. Alright, so we're going to take this rocker assembly off, so we do need to get the tensioner off. I'll loosen up the chain a little bit. Maybe. Okay. So. Oh my God. Yeah, somebody burnt the hell out of that. So anyway, this rocker assembly on this motor is basically incorporated into the cam. I would assume that if you were to change the cam that you'd have to take this sprocket gear off and then have it all slide out. I'm just kind of taking a look at it because this is the first time I've literally laid eyes on it. Maybe not the first time, but the first time I could say, okay, I can look at it. I've ordered parts in and shipped them off, but opened a box, transferred them to another box and looked at it. But yeah, not the greatest setup. And the first thing is that you're not going to be able to change the cam in this. I'd have to pop this out and then compare it to a stock cam and see if that's possible. But I will save that for another day. So you can see more on a normal GY6 A case 157 QMJ. Basically, your rocker would sit in a cradle in the head, and then you would just have a bridge that plopped over top of it. Not the case with this. And the question is, other than getting both camshafts down, looking at this and trying to figure out the marks, how they want you to. I almost have to assume that both lobes are down there. I almost have to assume that you want the 2 bolts parallel, but I'm not 100% sure with that. So, alright, taking a look at our head. Obviously the stud spacing is different, it's wider, because it's a 161 QMK. It's got a 61 millimeter piston in it already, 61 millimeter jug. So pop our head off. Oh, I gotta take the 2 bolts off. This thing is rough. Let me grab a head and compare it to. Grab a head off the bench. Alright. Exhaust, you can see that's your AK head. Exhaust is clocked the same. So I've seen some of these, not this motor, but I've seen motors with this stud spacing where it has a taller head, meaning that A, it needs a taller cam chain, or a longer cam chain. Probably normally with the taller head it's like a 47 link instead of a 45 link, which is standard. We are clocked the same. It actually comes with 8mm studs right from the get, so that's always nice to have a thicker exhaust stud on there. So these are going to have 8mm studs. That's what you find in performance heads. Usually find 6mm on like a stock 150 head. Looking at the, I'd almost have to knock the valves off because I'm wondering. It's hard to tell. Well, this head is definitely taking into consideration. The head is definitely taller. I'm trying to take into consideration it's got a lip on it for the valve cover gasket to fit onto. Almost curious enough to knock the valves out of this just to see. That being the case, I'm wondering if we don't have a longer cam chain in here, which I'd be curious to find out. So we might go ahead and just tear it all the way down just to see. But I'm going to take a valve out of here. I just want to compare the length of the valve with the stock length valve. Man, this thing stinks. Did I move? No. One is still stuck because of the oil. I'm gonna venture to guess that valve is longer, and I can tell by looking at it. Let's grab a stock length valve. Should have some sitting up here. I mean, that's an exhaust valve. This is an intake valve. They should be the same length. So you can see it's taller, and by a lot. Okay, so let's do this. Exhaust valve. Alright, this is an exhaust valve from an RZR 170. It's a Bronco ATV exhaust valve replacement, stock replacement valve. And I noticed that when I started carrying these that they were longer than a GY6 valve. So, that being said, you got three different lengths here. This is GY6, Razor 170, and Trailmaster 200, or QMK 161 valve. So, that being said, valves are a lot longer. So that makes a big difference far as finding parts for it, because you can't just order a regular old valve and plop it in there. So that was a little surprising. Oh. I'm over here fiddling around in the background. So this is the Universal Parts QMK 161 head. Same thing, it's got the same, it's a nice casting. And what it looks like is came from the same factory, because it's got the same stamp on it. So this is identical to this head here. So the valves in this head to replace it are going to be, I just want to make absolutely positively sure that's what I'm looking at. So this thing's a little bit different, and now that I'm looking at it, yeah. So that was the exhaust valve. You can see that the intake valve sticks up a little further. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pop out the intake valve too. Let's compare it to the exhaust valve, because I'm wondering if it's like two completely different lengths at this point. Oh. What do I do with the valve tools, man? Oh, it's right for me. Hiding under the motor. I'm definitely not gonna get these valves mixed up with all my other valves. Pop. There's one key. There's the other. What in the heck? It's pretty funny. Oh, you know what? No, it's not funny. The valve spring broke. The inner valve spring. I'm like, this thing's got 3 valve springs on it. No. There's our problem right there. Now we know why it was under warranty. Valve springs are the same size. Is the valve the same size? It is. It's just the way it sits in the head. Just look different. But no, they're the same size. They're both long. Valve springs are identical, except for the broken one here. So I think I found the problem with why it was under warranty. Now, while we got that going on, let me check. Grab a stock valve spring. Valve spring shorter too. So that's a typical GY6 valve spring. And that's your QMK valve spring on this head. So you can see they're a little bit different there. So you can't just take the AK parts and slap them in the head to fix it. Gonna have to come up with their own head. Gonna have to come up with the specific valves, the specific valve springs. We already know what's different about this. It's not the same as AK's because the valve spacing is, or the stud spacing is different. So I knew that's gonna be different. Now, compared to the 150 version for the Trailmaster, the timing chain tensioner, or at least the guides, these guides are regular A case. Okay. The reason why I know that is because of the access panel thing on the side where we're looking at. That's got the Allen bolt that you'd find in any 150. So therefore, this takes like the regular standard guides. Whereas the guide for the 150 actually has a pin that sits in the it's a 6mm pin that it's like not a dowel pin. It's not hollow. So it's a 6mm pin that actually sits in and basically gets pinched between that recess panel and in the case. So it looks like they left the oil in here. So I'm going to take a minute and drain this out and get a sheet pan, catch all the gunk, and we'll quickly tear this apart and see what we got. Alright, didn't look like there was much oil in it, so it's going to be a little messy probably. Try and keep these parts a little bit together. I'm making a mess. Comes out. No. Come on. I'm going to skip a step and leave a stator on there. Start a collection of tool. Well, they ran enough to stretch the oil pump chain a little bit. most likely, yeah, this thing got hot because that piston don't even pivot. Chances are this crank is shot just from this. Probably got so hot it broke the valve spring. So originally I thought maybe the valve spring was the cause, but not the case. So checking out a couple things here. This crank is different. Alright, it's the same but different. So on a Trailmaster crank, what makes it unique or different is because the internal reverse motor doesn't have the kickstart gear behind the variator. So this portion right behind the variator is tapered. It has a kickstart gear that slides over, and as you hammer down on the variator with the nut, it basically shoves it on that taper and it sticks, and that's the spacer. On a Trailmaster crank, you don't have that. So you just have a taper, and that sticks through the oil seal. I'm not a taper, excuse me. Let me use the right word. Step down, or step up, or step down, however you're looking at it. The variator rests against that flat spot right there. Okay? And then this part where you see that's black, it sticks out of the seal. Alright. The other different thing about it is that the crank bearings on both sides of the typical 150 crank are different. These bearings are the same size. So, it's like a typical GY6 crank in the fact that the bearings are the same size, but it's like the Trailmaster 150 crank in that it doesn't have a kickstart gear. Be curious to see if you could actually stick this in a regular A-case motor and just use a step down, get rid of the kickstart gear. The only reason I'm curious is, well, will the pulleys line up? Because that kickstart gear will make sure that the front pulley's in the right spot. So this crank is different. So at this point now, I was under the impression that there's already 3 different cranks. 2 that come into internal reverse motors, one being the one that's in the Trailmaster, Hammerhead GTS, and the American Sportworks, which is the one I was describing to you. And then I think the Candies actually have another crankshaft, but I'm not sure about that. I've been told that. I just haven't worked on enough Candies 200s that I would know. But this officially means that there's 3 different crankshafts, because the 200s have a different crankshaft than the 150 as far as, you know, the internal reverse motor, and then you have your standard crankshaft. So that there, I learned something else right there. The other thing, this is going to be a little tough to curious about the cam chain. See if the cam chain is any longer. The other thing I'm curious about is if you stuck a regular crank in here and put a kickstart gear on it, but the seal on this side. I'm going to need to get glasses for this. Oh, no, that looks like your standard crankshaft seal. So, the 19.8 seal. So I don't think the crankshaft seal is any different. So, you actually might be able to just stick the, it all depends on where the clutch shaft lines up on this motor. If you just stuck a regular GY6 crank in here with the kickstart gear, it might work. Not so sure. If that's the case, then why would they make a whole new crank? I don't know, but I'll have the case here at my disposal so I can kind of do some experiments to find out. One last thing I want to find out. Definitely want to get my glasses for this anyway. Give me 1 second. I want to count the cam chain. Alright. Start there. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 20, 21, 22, 25, 26, 27, 28, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 40, 41, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. It's kind of what I thought because of the taller head. So that head is taller. So not that there's too many. Now there is so one thing you could do, I am saving this for a project. So this is a head that has a QMK stud spacing that takes a regular camshaft, okay, and it is taller. And I believe that this motor originally had, the motor this came off of was a 47 lip chain also. So one thing that you could do, possibly, is if you gave this a good port job, gave it a good valve job, and I might even pop the valves out of this and compare them to that. But if you did all that and clean this up real nice, you could probably adapt this head to this motor and then be able to run camshaft on it. So that's gonna be the next step of this project. So what I'm planning on doing next is, and I might, just for sake of curiosity, might try and install a regular camshaft in this and do something with this head and put a crankshaft I meant to say, but and then do something with this head and put a universal parts 61 millimeter back on it. So basically what we would have is a Trailmaster 200 motor that is 61 millimeter like it was stock, but has a better head on it, option of camshaft, and then we'll, just for the sake of curiosity, we'll see how a GY6 crankshaft works with this. You know, whether, you know, I insert one in there, put a kickstart gear on it, check the alignment of the pulleys, just out of curiosity sake. The rest of this, though, parts comparison wise, I'm 99% positive in talking to my guy at Trailmaster, because I just started carrying all the internal parts, or at least most of them. The parts that I know are fail parts, you know, when riding too hard, like this output shaft or reverse shaft in there, the gear cluster, little armature that shifts in there, shift drums and stuff. They're all on the website now on Buggies.com. 90% sure talking to him that those parts also are the same in here, which really there's not too much reason why would you carry two different sets of transmission parts. So that's going to be the next phase, next video on this particular project here, this motor. Is we're going to try and adapt some different parts and see if we can't make this 200 motor, which would bolt right back into a Trailmaster. It'd actually bolt right back into a 150 Trailmaster or a carbide or a Hammerhead GTS, and see what kind of performance we get out of this. These motors, I have had the opportunity to drive the EFI 200, the 200 EX, I believe they call it. Not impressed. It's a dog. But that being said, it's a bone stock buggy, and bone stock buggies, they come neutered right from the factory, and the main reason why is they want them to pass the emissions. You know, Chinese don't care about anything except getting these over here so we can buy them. So they're not looking for speed or performance or anything. They're looking for something that starts, runs, and rolls, that the American consumer will purchase and have fun with, and this and that and the other thing. And then from there, you're on your own. You know, there's no factory support from any of these companies, whether it be Trailmaster, Candy, or, you know, even the employees at Trailmaster I talked to will tell you the same thing. They're not interested in making it go faster. They're just interested in selling it to you. But you know, us Americans, we like to go faster. So that's going to be the next project as far as this goes. So I'm going to clean this case up. Transmission seems to be okay. Everything seems to be smooth in there, but I'm going to clean these cases up. And then when I put this motor back together, we'll do step by step and show you how we're doing it, what we're doing it, why we're doing it, what worked, what doesn't work. We'll do the experiments right on camera. And you know, I know, and I'm in touch with a lot of people, you know, through Facebook and whatnot, that are are they're not afraid to monkey around with it. They're not afraid to try something. So we'll give that a shot. In the meantime, the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to do the opposite with this motor. So this is the motor that was sent to me, and it looks just like a 150. This is the one I just pulled that new this new Universal Parts head off of, and this is why the reason I wanted to, and kind of hung with it. So the customer sent me this, wanted a hot rodded 150, thought I could do it out of that, but then found out it had the QMK stud spacing, and I was all for it till I got to the head part and realized that it got basically the Trailmaster head on it. So I couldn't change the camshaft. So I called him up, I explained it to him, gave him the options. Here's what we could do. We could just start fresh with new cases, be a 150. Bottom line is that the parts will be a lot more available for you, and that's the way you want to go. And I kept this motor. It's 90% rebuilt. And what I'm going to do is finish this motor. I'm going to go ahead and order a camshaft from the camshaft assembly from Trailmaster. What I think I'm going to do is, even though it'll have the stock Trailmaster cam in it, I'm going to, actually I already did. I did some porting work on this. So that head has a little bit of port and polish to it and whatnot, but I want to put that together. I'm going to sell it at some sort of discount when it's all together, and I'll make sure it's got good clutching and whatnot. I'll either put it up on the website, I'll make an announcement on YouTube, probably on Facebook also. Anybody who's interested in buying a motor, it'll come with an exhaust pipe, the whole deal, just like I do with all my other motors. The only difference is it'll be like a 61 millimeter and external reverse style motor for like an older buggy, but slightly discounted just because of for the reasons we're discussing, is that even though the head will have some port work done to it, will be basically restricted to the cam assembly that is on a stock Trailmaster. I definitely think that when I'm done with it, it would rip better than this, as it was sitting stock. So that's what I'm going to do, is a little bit of switcheroo. I knew that motor was coming, so I kept that head on the side. Like I said, I want to work that head, massage it, and put it on that motor over here and see what I can do with this. But I did learn a lot, because I didn't know this was taller. I didn't know the valves were longer. The crankshaft, I learned from that. So, and just this whole, like I said, laying eyes on this thing for the first time. So there's a lot to be learned here. At least I feel a little more knowledgeable. And at least when somebody calls me, I have some tools in my head that I can help them out with what they can do and what they can't do. And knowing that, like I said, knowing that we have a longer cam chain in there, that's a big help, because the last thing I want to do is sell people the wrong parts, which is why I kind of want to do this and make a video and share it with you. I'm sure there's a lot of Trailmaster 200s out there now. Hammerhead, as far as I know, are the only company still making just like the 150. You're sticking with the old platform. Kudos to Hammerhead as far as that's concerned. So hopefully that's the case, and the 150 sticks around, because that motor's got a lot more parts. And even I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but some guys that talk to it, they don't know why they switched either, but they're not in control. They work for them here on the side of the water. So, but that's it for now. So there'll be more on this whole project a little later, at another time. But at least now what I'll have to do is box everything up and kind of keep it to itself and go from there. So if you need parts, go to gotbuggies.com. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section. Hit the like button. You can get a hold of me. There's a JD's Custom Buggies shop page. If you want to get a hold of me that way, you can send me a message on there. And if you haven't already, subscribe. MBX just took off this past season, or the 2024 season just started this past weekend. I wasn't able to make the race, and a large portion of that was because I overslept. But long story short, we have another business, and my wife had to work. We had some family out of town, so we had to basically be there and keep eyes on the other business. And wife had to work late. Set the alarm. I put the phone on the purchase charge, and apparently I put it on there wrong. the phone was dead when I woke up the next morning. We woke up too late to make the race. Ended up that, of course, it was good we were in town. Somebody had called out, so we ended up working on Sunday. But congratulations to Dave Abel and Justice Hatch for winning their Dave in adult and Justice in youth, for getting their wins this weekend. We had a really low count, but anticipate that the next race is going to have a lot more racers because I'll be there, and looks like the wife will be there. So we'll have some videos on that coming up too. At least some of the guys who had cameras on their buggies. So keep an eye out for that. And until next time, JD's out.